A couple of years ago till date, Canada sat on the world's third largest oil reserves, propelling it to a rank among the top 10 global economies with a thriving GDP per capita. And with strong economic ties to the United States and the Commonwealth, coupled with a highly educated workforce, Canada is no doubt positioned for success. But beneath this surface prosperity lie some challenges: an aging population, soaring housing costs, and stagnant productivity growth. Can Canada weather these storms and stay afloat in the competitive global economy? Or is it destined to lag further behind other major economies? In this video, we'll uncover the truth about Canada's economic prospects. Let's dive in. The origin of Canada's economic woes. Back in 2008, when the big financial crisis hit, Canada dodged the bullet compared to the US, UK, and other big economies. It wasn't as affected by all the money troubles swirling around at the time. But here's the problem. Since then, Canada's economy hasn't been keeping up so well. Even though Canada had a smooth ride through the storm, now it's struggling to catch up in the race. It's worthy of note that weak growth in Canada has persisted for a decade, with per capita real gross domestic product posting its smallest gain in nearly a century. Also, Canada's economy has grown significantly slower than that of the United States, suggesting that the origins of Canada's growth crisis are domestic. This is particularly because slower growth in Canada has originated mostly in declining business investment and exports, which are the sectors of the economy that embed innovative technologies and reflect the competitiveness of Canadian businesses. But the truth is, growth is neither automatic nor well understood by economists, despite widespread claims that sustaining growth is easy to achieve by adopting a few simplistic policies. This is part of the reason Canada hasn't been able to rectify its poor record of growth by continuing its exclusive focus on such formulas as policymaking. In fact, Canada has adopted many of the policies economists recommend to boost growth, including high levels of immigration and education, lavish government support for research and development, and free trade deals with all the GC7 nations. Yet slow growth has continued. So in order to deal with the growth problem, the Canadian government decided to pay more attention to distribution rather than the creation of income, and to stabilizing the short-term course of the economy rather than raising its long-term potential. Unfortunately, this focus has only reinforced the downward pressure on growth. In particular, policies such as more government spending and relentless monetary stimulus provide at best short-term growth but depress long-term potential, especially through their negative impact on business investment. Trade and the Canadian economy. Trade is another major determinant of a country's economic significance. Unlike the US, Canada is much more reliant on trade with the rest of the world. And while this might sound like an advantage, it's become one of the country's greatest setbacks. Now, Canada's principal trading partners, the UK, Europe, and China, are all seeing slower economic growth. And as you would expect, it's caused a fall in demand for Canadian exports. This has made Canada lose its long-term competitiveness. Another problem Canada's facing is declining productivity. Compared to the US, Canada has slipped behind quite significantly. And the reasons for this fall in productivity are lack of investment and lack of innovation. Now, foreign direct investments is crucial for Canadian small businesses and startups, with most investments coming from the US. Due to the good relationship and lack of movement restrictions between the US and Canada, many Canadians are moving to the US. While American companies benefit from Canada by placing headquarters and intellectual property there to conduct business operations and save taxes, Canadian policies favor US-based companies, thereby creating a monopoly and hindering innovation. But when Canadian startups go public through an initial public offering, they lose tax benefits, making it attractive for US firms to acquire them. This not only increases competition from the US, but also stifles innovation. Housing crisis and the Canadian economy.
Real estate website Zoocasa analyzed 26 Canadian cities and found that renting is cheaper than paying a mortgage, especially in Vancouver, Toronto, and Calgary. The lone exception was Winnipeg, where home ownership costs slightly less.
Canada's economy hasn't been helped by the fact that its housing market is one of the biggest bubbles in the world. The country has the second highest rate of house price to income in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Because real estate is by far the biggest sector in the whole economy, the prices of housing began to increase in the 2010s in a bid to avoid the problems of the 2008 credit crunch. This was done through a combination of low interest rates, rising population, and restrictions on building. This resulted in an increase in the price of houses and rents that were out of reach. Even though it's a familiar story across the world, Canada's crisis is one of the most acute. The political pressure was so intense that the government passed a law banning foreign ownership of homes, adding to the inflationary pressure. In April 2024, inflation in Canada slowed down again, marking its slowest pace in 3 years.
And we have breaking news for your wallet regarding inflation and interest rates. Stats Canada has released the latest inflation data for the month of April. Scott Peterson from our business unit is back. And Scott, economists are expecting that inflation was going to cool down.
This means prices for things like goods and services across the country didn't rise as quickly, showing that the economy might not have been as hot as before and that some improvements have begun to happen. And because of this, the Canadian government might even end up cutting interest rates. In addition to this, the official measure called the Consumer Price Index went up by 2.7% compared to the same time in 2023, which is exactly what experts anticipated. And when they took out the prices that are easily subjected to change like food and energy, the increase was still 2.7%. Interestingly, the Bank of Canada, which looks after the country's money, has been keeping a close eye on these numbers. They want to make sure the inflation rate stays around 2%. So right now, they're thinking about lowering interest rates to help the economy grow. Some big factors behind the inflation slowdown are the cost of mortgages and rent, gas prices, and food prices. Because the central bank aims to get inflation back to 2% by 2025, they're keeping an eye on those factors behind the inflation slowdown to modify it. The way forward for Canada. Recent research emphasizes how important a country's culture is for its economic growth. Without a culture that encourages entrepreneurship and innovation, even great policies and institutions won't give good results. In Canada, people generally prefer to be affiliated with foreign businesses. But to boost growth, Canadians need to believe in their business's ability to compete globally without too much government involvement. If this belief's revived, Canada will be able to achieve its economic and social goals and become a strong player on the world stage again. What do you think about this stagnation in growth and the inflationary pressures Canada is facing? Let us know in the comments. Also, like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't. See you soon.